All aboard! Welcome to the All Aboard podcast. I am your host and commissioner, Brandon DeFreitas. I am here with another DeFreitas, Alex. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on the pod.
Of course, before we hop into it, I know we're a couple days early here, but happy 30th.
Thank you.
Coming down the wire. You're now, a New Hampshire resident, turning 30, so things are definitely moving quick for you.
Yep, I got my first gun too, so living that New Hampshire life.
Oh, well, we won't touch on that on the All Aboard podcast for sure. But listen, I know you don't have a lot of time, and we're doing an emergency pod here to talk about all these trades that have gone through in the Dynasty League since we've opened the off season. And I know there are two in particular, and I'm sure you're ready to roast me. So let's, we'll cut the formalities and we'll just jump right into it. The first trade I know you wanted to discuss was between myself and Edwin. Edwin receiving Khalil Herbert and the eighth pick of the first round this year in exchange for Ezekiel Elliott and the ninth pick of the third round this year going to me. So what are your thoughts? I know from what I've heard, you were also in the Zeke market.
I was in the Zeke market, but I wasn't willing to back up the Brinks truck like you were. I think it's a pretty good move for you if you're trying to compete. The reason why I was on the Zeke train was I looked at it as Edwin was so close to the championship. He made the championship game, so close to winning it. And I think Zeke really let him down in that championship week, as he did pretty much any owner that owned him across fantasy. And I figured that I might be able to capitalize on him being a little upset at the performance that Zeke put forth in the championship. I don't think I was offering quite as much as you were, but I was in the market for sure.
Yeah. I think Zeke's an interesting evaluation because I would say for most Zeke owners, they were probably disappointed this season. But then you look at the overall stats, and he's sitting there as the running back 8 in half PPR formats. So it's an interesting eval going forward where you're like, Tony Pollard's there. How much more does Pollard get involved? And then on Zeke, you're like, didn't particularly look great this year. And then you're trying to decide, was it injury related? Is he aging out? Are they going to get Pollard? Like I said, getting Pollard more going forward. So it is a very interesting dynasty asset. And I don't know. I'm very curious to see how this works in the long run for both myself and Edwin.
Yeah, it's tough when you look at Zeke because his age is, what is he, 26? So he's not an old guy. It's just really with the running backs, it's about the mileage, and he's been in the league for a while and gotten a lot of carries. I'm not sure how many carries he got in college, but I know that's something that if you really want to get into it, you want to look back on how many carries they had when they were playing in college as well. I think the reason why I sort of like the move for you is I look at the first round pick, and depending on what it amounts to and then how long Zeke lasts. But if you look at where that first round pick came from, that came from the Adam Thielen trade, did it not?
Yeah, it did. Yep, that was Trevor's pick.
So essentially you're trading Adam Thielen and Khalil Herbert for Ezekiel Elliott and that third round pick. And I think when you spin it like that, I think it's a fantastic deal for you.
No, I appreciate that spin on it for sure. And I think I've told you before, my strategy trading in fantasy is just trying to be on the right side of a trade more often than you're on the wrong side of a trade. Just knowing you can't win them all, so I just make a bunch of trades and hoping in the long run I improve the team, and that's sort of why I'm so active on the trade market.
Yeah, and don't worry, the roast is coming. So once we trade, the roast will be there.
Unbelievable. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think for me, it actually started off when I reached out to Edwin. I reached out to a few owners in the league, and I'm like, are there any aging players you're looking to move on from? And I'm looking to compete this year. I'm looking to buy into this year. And if we compare my team to your team, Alex, like you have Jonathan Taylor, you have Alvin Kamara, you have Jamar Chase, and I'm not even naming all your players. And a lot of these guys are young stars. And like, quite frankly, like I didn't feel like I had those horses. And I have guys like Saquon Barkley, even like Nick Chubb, like running backs are an expiring asset. And while I'm strong at that position, I don't want to go another season with those guys not competing. So I'm sort of buying in, and we'll see how it works out. But you said the roast is coming, and I'm assuming you said my trade with Ben, and I'm guessing this isn't the Melvin Gordon for a second round pick trade you want to discuss. Probably more the Calvin Ridley trade.
I didn't even really think about the Melvin Gordon one, but definitely the Calvin Ridley trade. So if you want to give a lowdown on it, I'll give my thoughts.
So I shipped away Terrace Marshall Jr., second round pick for the Carolina Panthers last year. Rough rookie season, still 21 years old though. And a 2023 first, my own first next year, in exchange for Calvin Ridley. That's the trade that went down. And it's funny, this one started off with Penn just texting me going, "You think anyone would give up a first for Ridley?" And I was like, probably not. I mean, it's just so tough with mental health. Like, knowing, it could be a wide variety of things. I think it's great that it's being prioritized too. And you just don't know. Ridley could return, or he could be out, he could never play again. So that's how the conversation started. And finally I got to the point where I was like, for a first round pick next year, I'll sit back, I'll roll the dice at that price. And that's where I ended up.
Okay, this is where the start of my issue with your management comes. After the original fantasy draft, the theory was you're going to draft young guys. You're kind of going to draft for the future. I did too. I think I just got a little bit lucky on Jonathan Taylor's big year, and then what Jamar Chase amounted to, which if it wasn't for Will Tan, maybe I wouldn't have even drafted the guy, right? Yeah. So I just got kind of lucky, but we had the same mindset going into the league. And then John B as well. And you looked at how big of a dumpster fire his team was all season long, just drafting for the future. So then you stockpile picks, you make a good move for Adam Thielen, and I'm like, wow, he's really going to have a bunch of assets, and give it a few years, and he's going to compete. And then all of a sudden, you sell all these assets for these aging guys with mental health issues, and it's like, what are you doing over here? Are you playing for the future, or are you just selling out to try and get a team that's going to compete? But what if the team doesn't compete? Then you don't have any future either. So I'm just a little skeptical whether or not you're close enough to compete where you can buy in on some of these guys and sacrifice the future. We'll see. Hopefully you can compete. But I think if you can't, then I think you're kind of putting your team in a tough place down the road by giving away these assets that you were going to use to rebuild. Not even rebuild, but that you were going to use to put together a wagon 2 or 3 years down the road.
Well, I'll start off my rebuttal by just saying I'm not Danny Ainge, and I'm not going to sit here and load up the main Red Claws with a bunch of first round draft picks I picked that don't pan out. My personal opinion on first rounders is, I mean, it's a chance thing. It's like the NFL, and we're drafting these guys before training camp too. So it's like, I'll call a first round pick, I'm making this up, but like 50% chance to land a good asset. And even like, let's say 2 years ago, you drafted Jerry Jeudy, who's on your team, Alex. You're probably thrilled about drafting Jerry Jeudy when you get him. You get nothing from his first 2 seasons. Like, you're just as likely to hit a Jamar Chase sometimes, I mean, as to hit a Jerry Jeudy. I mean, what's the real difference in their evaluation coming out? I don't think it was that much. So like, I guess what I'm saying is that like, the picks look great, like, and the best thing about draft picks is they can't get hurt, they can't lower in value, but you're still taking a chance on a guy when you take them. And my whole goal when I was getting these assets was, I went into last season thinking I was going to potentially compete, but then quickly realized I drafted I drafted him too early in a startup year to compete right away, and then started selling off assets. But my intention was honestly to acquire draft capital so that I could buy in during the off season. And I'll say there's a little bit of, when you're playing Madden and you stock up for the future with a bunch of draft picks and you hit that nice little simulate button, all of a sudden you're there on the next season, and like, I'll give that caution to the wind to, I see, Ben's over there rebuilding. It's fun to acquire assets. The actual season, when you sit through it and you're losing and you're not really a part of it, it wasn't fun. It was not fun. I don't want to go through that anytime soon again. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go picks for proven assets and see where that leads me.
Well, give it a few years when Calvin Ridley is not still not playing ball, and Zeke is over there in a wheelchair with his rundown ankles, and I think you'll be quickly not competing but missing out on some picks.
I mean, like, look, I know, like, I traded a first for Zeke, right? And I did that knowing that I'm mostly doing it for next season. If I get anything more for Zeke, or I'm able to trade him after he signs somewhere else next year, like, to me, that's a bonus. Like, I'm going into it expecting 1 year from Zeke. Calvin Ridley, I'm going into it knowing, like, I could have an elite receiver who's in his prime, or I could just get absolutely nothing for him. I'm aware of that, but I also look around the league and it's like, no one's going to give me a young player or a player in Calvin Ridley's situation unless he's hurt or has something going on. Like, you're not trading Jamar Chase for anything. I offered you 3 first-round picks at one point, and like, you reasonably were like, there's no point to doing this. I just hope I draft Jamar Chase,
Yeah. But in all seriousness, it is nice to have you making moves and putting your team in a position to compete. I'm a little surprised by the 180 because I didn't really see this coming, and but that's what fantasy is about: taking risks and putting your team in the best position to win. It's just, dynasty is an interesting perspective, that it's not putting your team in the best position to win this year. You have to think long term. So that's about it for what I have for time for roasting your trade decisions. There were a couple other ones that were out there. One between Mark and Ben, which was just old guy number 1 for old guy number 2, and AJ Green and Taysom Hill. So that one's a pretty uneventful trade. And then some other ones. Oh, the one I did want to mention, you can go into more depth about this, was John's trade for Aaron Jones. And I look at that in comparison with Edwin, and I think Edwin was so close, and then Zeke really did bone him, and Edwin was like, you know what, I want to take my roll the dice and try and get a young guy for this running back long on the tooth that kind of screwed me in the championship. And then John, on the other hand, goes out and wins the championship, and he's probably floating that high and like, you know what, I'm doubling down. I want to go back for back and back to back and trades for Aaron Jones. So I think that was probably the biggest trade that's happened so far.
I'll admit, like, my intention this offseason was to go in and try to build a competing roster. You get a little nervous when the absolute wagon adds Aaron Jones to his stable. You're like, because even if he's splitting with AJ Dillon, he's still no doubt going to be a top 20 guy and an asset that's going to help him compete for a championship.
Yep.
So yeah, no, I do think that's the biggest one. And maybe there's a possibility, that move has led to me, doubling down on a Calvin Ridley, trying to get my own hat in the ring. But like you said, the cool thing with Dynasty is, like, you're allowed to take these risks and you're going to have to live with them. So we'll see what happens on that front for myself. And definitely, like, we're all chasing John at this point, I would say.
Yep. For sure. Well, thanks for having me out. We look forward to more moves in the off season. And if anyone wants to talk some deals, you know how to reach me.
Absolutely, for sure. Thanks for joining, Alex. We'll get you on a full pod sometime, and enjoy your 30th.
Thank you. Take it easy.
All right. Catch you later. Well, we're still on here. We're still going to continue with the podcast, but Alex did want to call in, chime in his thoughts on the trades. Nothing like your younger brother always has to call in from time to time, and I would say put you in your place for your trades. So appreciate him calling, giving me a hard time. I think I maybe didn't mention it to Alex, but I feel like there was a good amount of the league that was expecting me to buy in. My team towards the end of the year was, Jimmy and I in the consolation bracket were putting up points that were beating or at least on par with teams in the playoff brackets. So I look at it as, of the 4 teams that missed, I think Jimmy and myself have a really good chance of potentially making that run into the playoffs. And then I think John B, depending on what sort of moves he can make in the next, well, from now through the season, how his draft picks go, what trades does he make? He has a chance to make a leap as well. So, unfortunately, I do, and I know Tan probably feels the same way. I think he's on a multi-year rebuild plan. But that's sort of how I felt, and part of the reason I made those 2 moves. And yeah, like I said, you make these trades for these players. It's just like the one thing is you have a first round pick, it sounds great. And like at the same token, like I can't just go out and get like a 24-year-old superstar. Those players aren't going to get moved. And I mean, example on my team, I know Ben and I have been talking a lot in trades back and forth, and I know he wants Elijah Moore, but you get to the point, and I'm not saying Elijah Moore is a superstar, but a 21-year-old wide receiver who's shown the flashes that Elijah Moore has shown and looks like he's a hit, like nobody's trading those players at the end of the day. Unless you're getting a true difference maker, you're just not going to let those guys go. So I think for me, like the types of players I'm looking for is, guys coming off disappointing years, older players, gambles I can make, and being aware that, look, I'm going to lose some of these. You're gonna have to do it. It's all about risk appetite. But we've covered a couple of these trades here, and we'll get an easy one out of the way. I also traded a second round pick for Melvin Gordon. It's 2023 second. I think based on talking to Ben, it was probably more than what was out there on the market. I know John B had a little bit of interest in Melvin Gordon as well. I don't think he was going as high as a second round pick either. So another player, Gordon, a little long in the tooth, but he played really well this year, splitting time with Javonte Williams. Maybe that kept him fresh. And I could see him getting a job. He's a free agent this offseason, and I'm kind of gambling like if I have Melvin Gordon, who's a free agent, I have Ronald Jones, and I believe Dearness Johnson is a restricted free agent who's going to be fairly available for teams because he was undrafted. So those are 3 guys where I'm sitting. I'm like, if I can get 1 or 2 of those guys to get starting opportunities, that helps my roster. So that was the thought process on the Melvin Gordon trade. But circling back to John, John comes in, and we haven't read off the full trade, so bear with me a second while I pull it up. This one was interesting. When Ben goes out and he releases his press conference, I was interested in Aaron Jones, and you look at Aaron Jones, and I was thinking, should I trade my 2023 first for him? And I was sort of on the fence whether or not I should do it. And John comes out. I love the move he made. He just says kind of something similar to what I did, I guess, with Zeke too. It's like offer more than the market. And you can get concerned with value sometimes, but John goes out and offers his first round pick next year, so he still keeps his first pick. I know he's excited to, John's a big draft guy. He wants to get involved in the rookie draft, so he still gets to make his pick coming up here in April, May. And then Pat Fryermuth, who had a great rookie season, looks like he's going to be a potential tight end 1 for years to come, top 12 tight end, I should say, for years to come, in exchange for Aaron Jones. And I just love the aggressiveness. John's team, it's built to win now. I don't think it's particularly old necessarily. I think he still has a window of 2 more seasons. And getting a guy like Aaron Jones, like I said, a guy where like people there's a take, and it could be right too, but my opinion is, yes, AJ Dillon's there, but Aaron Jones is still going to get the passing game work. And as long as Aaron Rodgers stays in Green Bay, Aaron Jones is going to return running back 2 value at a minimum. And I think because of the passing game work, you're looking at high end running back 2, low end running back 1. With AJ Dillon coming in for a little bit more carries. But look, Aaron Jones is such an explosive player. You can score from anywhere on the field. He can catch passes, which is big in fantasy. So I don't see a world where if Aaron Jones is healthy and Aaron Rodgers is there, I think RB20 is the floor. And I would say he's going to end up being at least like RB12 in my opinion. So I think it's a great move for John. He's, I mean, like I said, he was a wagon this year. He won 12 straight games in the or maybe 10 straight games. He went 2-2 and then ended up 12-2 at the end and won both his playoff matchups, takes home the first championship, and then makes the biggest move so far of the offseason. So thumbs up to John on the aggressiveness, and thumbs up to Ben on this trade too. We haven't talked much about Ben's side, and I'd like to get Ben on. I'm sure Ben would love to come on at some point and talk about his thoughts. But he's in a situation where going into the offseason, he's got Calvin Ridley, Godwin, and Gallup, three of his receivers where he's like, and even Robert Woods too. He's got 3 ACL tears, and then he's got Calvin Ridley. And the reality is none of us know what's going on with Calvin Ridley. I'm not even sure the Atlanta Falcons know what's going on with Calvin Ridley. So it's a complete gamble in a fantasy format like this, what you're going to do. And he said, look, I just have to rebuild. That's too many pieces. And Fryermuth in a first, like that's a really good haul for Aaron Jones. So this is one of those trades where I'm like, this is great for both sides, and I really like it from both perspectives. Like if I'm in each of their seats, I make the same deal. So I think it was just totally an even trade for them, and I like what they did there. Moving on to I mean, we're not even going to talk about the Taysom Hill and the AJ Green deal. I feel like AJ Green's not going to be fantasy relevant next year, and I don't expect Taysom Hill to be the starter in New Orleans either. So it is what it is. Like it's just kind of funny, it was helped Mark get in compliance with the quarterback rules, but ultimately I don't really see that going really anywhere. So we'll skip over that one. The one that was really interesting, and I have a fairly strong take on this. I think Ben got away with a little bit of highway robbery on Mark on the Matt Stafford trade. Matt Stafford, Ben sends him out of town for Nico Collins and a 2023 first from Mark. Couple things here. Stafford's been awful lately, and is he 33? He's 33. And like, call me crazy. I know the people aren't really going to agree with me here. I'm going to look like an idiot or something. I know everyone's like, oh, Stafford's been great. But outside of peppering Cooper Kupp and getting Cooper Kupp to have a historic season, has Matt Stafford really been better than Jared Goff? The teams like maybe the record's a little bit better, but not really. I think they could have done a very similar thing this season with Jared Goff at quarterback and instead of Matt Stafford. And I'm being dead serious about that. I don't think he's played particularly well. He's been horrendous, and he was horrendous in the month of December and starting off January as well. So I have my concerns with Matt Stafford going forward. And still an asset in our format. It's a super flex quarterback league. So definitely not taking shots at like saying he has no value. But what I don't like about it is Mark has Justin Herbert and Tom Brady. So this isn't even a player who's going to get in his starting lineup to start the season. Like his best lineup does not include Matthew Stafford. And then he's also got Mac Jones. So yeah, he's got the best quarterback room in the league right now. That's fantastic. But he really needed receiver and running back depth, I think, to compete with John. Mark went 8-6 this year. He drafted a lot of older players. He kind of went all in as well. This similar to John, didn't work out for him. And he's had a couple of guys that, have seen their value decrease significantly since the draft. You look at Michael Thomas, Antonio Brown. We don't even know if he's going to play again. So I look at Mark's roster, and I think if I were in Mark's situation, he's sort of like, I'm trying to come up with a good comparison here. It's like the big three with the Celtics, the ones, when we were in college, like where you have, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and it's like, do we go for it one more season, or do we blow this thing up and trade it to trade away to the Nets? And, I've already taken a shot at Danny Ainge, but that was the best trade of Danny Ainge's career. If I'm Mark, I think I'm selling this offseason. I think he's decided he's going to try to continue to compete. And all power to you, but I'm getting like, those like last dance type vibes from him where it's like this team's cooked. It's a little aged out, and I think he's trying to make it hang on for one more season. Kind of like I don't know, the last year of Tom Brady in New England where he had nothing around him. Like it sort of feels like that for, ironically, the team that has TB12 and Mac Jones. So I didn't like the trade from Mark, and then from Ben, you got a first round pick for Stafford. I I don't know. I have my concerns that like maybe retirement's on the docket for Stafford. Maybe it's not, but like he's been bad. I don't think it's a for sure thing that he's going to like play a couple more seasons. And then, Nico Collins is a player I like as well. So I think Ben did well to get a prospect like Collins who fantasy wise didn't break out, but based on some people in the industry I trust, particularly Matt Harmon, who does reception perception, he looked at all the rookies and he said Nico Collins is winning on his routes. Looks like he could be an X receiver for the Houston Texans going forward. And that's interesting to me because they could improve that quarterback situation. Davis Mills actually played well too. Some, Davis Mills could be around, and showed some rapport at the end of the season with Nico Collins. I think he's a valuable player in our format. And, to see Mark trade away Collins and a first for Stafford. Like I said, I think Ben did really well there. And yeah, I mean, but in general, like I know earlier I said like, hey, Ben, be careful. Like picks, you don't know what they're going to turn into, but I understand his situation and I like what he did here. I like what he did with the Aaron Jones trade. Obviously, I like the risk I took on Calvin Ridley, but at the same token, from Ben's perspective, it's a complete gamble by both of us. No, we just don't know. I keep saying it, but we just don't know. So Ben's really stocked up, and kudos to him as well. I got to say, like, thank you. Like, you shook up the start of the offseason. This is what we dreamed of, these moves, these trades happening. That's why we played Dynasty. So a lot of credit to Ben. I think you really added like just poured some kerosene on the fire in our league, and I love it. It's been fantastic. So thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Moving on, I think we've covered just about every trade. Yeah, we got the Taysom Hill, Calvin Ridley. We talked about Ezekiel Elliott. We haven't had anything come in since. We talked about Melvin Gordon. So we've covered all the trades now, and keep them coming. Definitely keep them coming. A couple of administrative items I want to cover. I've been posting on the message board today, but we approved the rule where you can now move any 2021 rookie to your taxi squad and then pick players up now if you want, so that you have that flexibility. And I do kind of like how like in season, so what happens is in the off season you draft your players and then you can decide and filter back and forth between your taxi for rookies. And for this year it'll be 2021 rookies and 2022 rookies in there, and you can kind of play with that in the preseason. When week one starts, you're locked on your taxi squad, and if you promote a guy, he can't go back. But he can go back in the off season. So it's sort of like baseball where like maybe you have an option left, can be sent back down to the minors. So I do like the added flexibility there. And then I know, this has come up a couple of times with some owners asking me questions on the side. You can totally like I could put Elijah Moore on my taxi squad, pick up a free agent and hold them through the off season. That's totally fair game. It's open. You can do that. So feel free. I will just say I personally am not going to be moving any of the players I expect to be on my starting roster to the taxi. And that's just my own sort of decision. It has nothing to do. I don't think it's Bush League or anything. I just like, for me, I like looking at my roster and being like, okay, here are the players I expect on my active roster. Here's how my taxi looks like. If I draft 4 players, here's what's going to be. And I could do that on the side too, but I just personally don't think I'm going to be going in that route of adding established players to the taxi, but it is totally fair game. So please continue going that route if you were planning on it. And then one final thing here too. Well, actually, I did want to mention the other message where I said currently in the system, any free agent 2021 rookies are not being allowed to be picked up. It's because the system is designed to not let you pick up rookies in the offseason because we're going to have a rookie draft. What'll happen, and I talked to sleeper support, is next week when they update everyone's experience in the system, you'll be able to pick up those 2021 rookies. They'll be tagged as sophomores now. So look for that end of next week. I would say I'll be posting on the message board as I notice it happening. So I mean, I love that our league is full of such hardos that we're making trades and figuring this stuff out. And sleeper's probably like, wow, how is this league already like full into the off season? So I'm absolutely fired up for doing that, guys. And finally, I want to thank everyone as commissioner. Great first season. Thanks for joining, and definitely appreciate everyone's patience with me because, man, like we keep figuring out these things last minute, and it's frustrating. And I'm posting a bunch on the message board, so I appreciate you guys hanging in there, reaching out to me, being honest with me, and we're gonna keep having votes for everything as we can. So just appreciate the patience because I'm sure it's annoying getting a bunch of messages, but trying to figure it out as we go, and appreciate all the help with that. So with that, guys, that's the end of this emergency podcast. Off season wise, with the podcast, it's probably going to be a lot of this sort of format. Things come up because trying to do a weekly podcast when we're probably going to go like a month at a time sometimes, where like not much changes in the NFL. So I'm not sure we're going to be recording all the time, but as relevant things do come up, I'd like to have these. And it's an open door policy, guys. Like, love to get the guys on who haven't been on a pod before, but if you have a topic, hey, if you want to rebuttal on some of the things that were said about the trades, these are just my takes and Alex's takes. So let me know. We'll jump on. We'll do 15 minutes and we'll post it. So I think that's what the off season is going to be like. Let me know when you want to join. Love to have everyone. I know Travers is going to have a rules meeting or a rules podcast coming up. So as well. And with that, guys, owners meeting, our first one, probably coming up at some point next week. I'll try to schedule with you guys just to that'll be a free form trying to figure out what we want to vote on. Then we'll have one more meeting to be like, here's what's going to be voted on, discuss it, make sure everyone understands, and then officially vote. So that's what we have coming down the docket. But for now, enjoy the waivers. Keep talking those trades. It's going to be, even if right now you're like, oh, the guys, there's been so many trades, I'm not sure there's available guys. Well, let me tell you, the NFL landscape right now and the NFL landscape in August is going to be completely different. So it's going to be wild. So values are going to change. People are going to be on the trade market. Injuries are going to happen. So just stay on there, and we'll keep communicating and having a lot of fun together. So appreciate you guys listening in, and we'll see you on the next one. Your host, Brandon DeFreitas, the Old Bar Podcast. We'll see you next time.